Hey y'all, Jaime Fleres here. I am here with a few musings about boundaries. And I'm going to make this one shorter than most of my videos here. That's the intention, at least. So I've been thinking about boundaries a lot lately, today and really my whole life. I was born an empath, and so I'm a deep feeling person, and one of my defaults is really for love and harmony to persist in all of my relationships with humans. And I also grew up I have grown up. I have experienced a life in which I've experienced a lot of trespassing of boundaries and disrespect of my boundaries. And so that's been a learning edge for me, as I think it is for a lot of us. And without getting into all of my personal details, it's probably more than you need anyhow. There's two thoughts I want to offer. Well, there's something I want to offer around boundaries today as I sit with how I live with them in my life. I think there's two things, the two hardest things about boundaries. One of them is enforcing the boundaries that we have when they've been challenged. So I think of that as like advanced ninja boundary work. It's one thing to know what our boundaries are. It's another thing to state them. And it's a whole nother game to enforce them, especially when they're not being respected. So when someone pushes against a boundary and tests the boundary. And in my own inquiry around boundaries, I really adopt this idea that our boundaries are ours to hold and ours to enforce. And yet it can be challenging to continue to enforce a boundary when it's not being respected by whomever else is involved. So that's one thing that's hard about boundaries. And then the other thing that's hard about boundaries, kind of almost on the flip side, is when somebody in our lives has a boundary that we don't understand or we don't agree with. So when someone needs more space than we want, when someone needs a particular something's particular in the relationship we have with them, and we don't understand it or we don't agree with it or we want it to be different, and we have to sit in and hold the tension of that discomfort or that disappointment or whatever it might be. And those are the places especially where, well, in both situations, we have sort of this kind of advanced work to do. And I see this work, so I see the antidote in both of these situations as deep respect for our personal sovereignty and our respect for our interconnection. But, in the case of having to enforce a boundary, especially when we can second guess ourselves because it's being challenged or, there's, we're being seen as cold or distant or something like that. Our boundaries not being met with respect and embracing. We have to anchor into our personal sovereignty. We have to come back into our core and say, what do I know to be true? What do I know to be true? Like how, if I were to truly and madly and deeply love myself in this moment, what do I know to be true? And oftentimes that can offer us the energy or the medicine to support that enforcing of a boundary, which can be very painful and difficult to uphold and maintain. And then on the other side, when we don't understand someone else's boundary or we don't respect it or we don't agree with it, again, personal sovereignty is the antidote. The deep respect for another person's experience, their individual right to make choices for themselves and set boundaries for themselves. So, boundaries at their core, I know we're all learning how to navigate boundaries in interpersonal relationships as we continue to evolve, how our relationships play out on this planet. And, boundaries can be seen as this sort of adversarial thing, but actually boundaries are rooted in love. They're rooted in love for ourselves and love for others. And a recognition that in this particular world, in this 3D world, we are separate and we do get to navigate that, that I said at the beginning, like being an empath, I want to just love everybody all the time and like have everything be always great, but it's not actually the human experience. And so it's one of those things for us to learn, especially as healers, how to have strong boundaries that actually come from a deep place of self-love as well. And then to be able to love another, even when we're incredibly uncomfortable with the boundary that they feel like they need. So those are some musings. I'd love to hear from you. What is it like in your world when it comes to boundaries? What's hard for you? What how is it hard to receive boundaries? How is it hard to hold boundaries or set boundaries or even know what they are? What does a boundary even mean to you? I would love to hear more of your thoughts. And I hope that something in here has been useful to you. All right, be well. Bye.